This is not psychosis or some cognitive break, but an actual takeover of the mind.
Much of the public sculpture found in our cities is based on design seated in the human mind.
Certain places have an energy that not only attracts people, but attracts events. The mission of 13 Magnus is to monitor the effects of mind hacking. Obviously, this will be done with the highest of security to make sure that the ideas do not contaminate or threaten humanity.
This all leads to Niantic.
I know that many tools will be needed to fight this battle. You just have to know where to look and know what you're seeing.
Portals emit exotic matter into our world, and that matter has certain effects on our world. I started noticing that there were energy fields, anomalies on Earth all around me. A few of them exhibited properties that are as yet unexplained.
I know that there are others out there.
What if they're already among us, but we don't realize it?
I must be prepared to work with them or fight them. They are coming.
Something's wrong out there in the world. This doesn't feel like a scientific study. The one hope lies in understanding what happened to Niantic.
Not all mysteries are solved, but the joy comes in the pursuit.
All right, good.
So that gets that.
Yeah. So anyway, I did the really probably impolite and unconventional thing of introducing our moderator here. Usually the guest doesn't do that, but
I wasn't aware I was a moderator, so that's good.
yeah. But I just told him you're writing your PhD thesis on Ingress.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I'm working on some graduate level work, basically on Ingress, but also on augmented and alternate reality games and experiences, and in particular, how they may be used outside of their role as entertainment. So, in that work, I came across Ingress, I came across a number of other properties, but Ingress really seemed to be exceptional in a number of ways, in both the way it's structured and in the way it engages people. And so I've been studying a lot about it, and I know you've been involved with the project, and so it's good to be able to be here with you. So why don't we start off with you just telling us kind of what Ingress is and what you do with Ingress?
Sure, let me just check out the audience. Has anybody here ever actually played Ingress? Okay, well, we have 2 players, okay. All right, so I'll tell, what you sort of got from the trailer is that Ingress is a geo-mobile alternate reality game. And what that means is that you actually, to play the game, you actually have to go to the location. You know, I mean, like right here, and there are portals out in the real world, there are millions of them. Okay, and the fiction of Ingress is, and it's only fiction, contrary to some opinions, is that these portals are transdimensional wormholes that emit something called exotic matter. And exotic matter is real. It was discovered. It's kind of like the thing nobody talked about after the Higgs boson. You know, after the God particle, it had the good name, and so everybody did that. Nobody noticed exotic matter. And you can actually detect it. It's, you know, when you look at the scanner, what you find, what's very curious about it, they were talking about in the trailer, this much is true, but I mean, we'll get to fiction in a second, is that the places where they tend to find concentration of exotic matter have already been marked. And, you know, by humans, we tend to build things like public art, sculptures, statues, fountains, things like that. And like, for instance, this is the Weston LAX fountain, and it's visible on the map, and it's right in front of us. And since there are 2 factions that play the game, there's the Enlightened and the Resistance. I am, of course, Enlightened, and this is a Resistance portal, and it is in range. So I'm going to do the right thing, and first of all, I'm going to hack it and get some stuff out of it. And it's giving me, let's see what it gives me. It gives me a resonator, which is a thing that helps me harvest exotic matter, a few EMPs, which are weapons that help me destroy this obvious resistance portal. Now the resistance, there are two ways of looking at exotic matter. Is because exotic matter, in the real world, what we know about it is that it's ordered data. It's ordered information. It's not, but just nobody knows whether, where it comes from. Some people think that it comes from some, trans-dimensional life form. They call them shapers because exotic matter exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Am I describing this right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, based on...
Well, he's talking, I'll attack this portal here.
Based on my understanding of it, that's fairly accurate. The overall fiction of the game, I think, is that these portals, as you will have it, are in our world, are places where a signal is entering our world and it is changing the people around it. And how people feel about that change can be divided into two camps. There are those who believe that this is a threat to our innate humanity, and there are those who believe that it is a path forward in evolution. What is known is that this signal changes us, or has the potential to change us. It may inspire creativity, it may enhance people's ability to uncover their internal and hidden talents. And that's kind of where the term shaped comes from, which is a big part of this fiction, is that these portals, these places where this energy enters our universe, shapes people. It changes the way they think, it changes the way they behave. And that's kind of been the focus of my research in this. In particular, what I find interesting about Ingress is that people actually have anecdotally reported changes to their own behavior and changes to their own ability to tap their inner creativity, or perhaps even their inner personality via interaction with Ingress. And that to me was interesting, because I think one of the inherent, from an academic point of view, one of the inherent interesting things about gaming and storytelling is what we call sort of the suspension of disbelief, where basically you turn off reality for a short window of time, engage in a fiction, and then turn it back on. And that disconnect is what enables us to experience it fully. But with Ingress in particular, there seems to be a lack of suspension of disbelief, not initially, but over time, with exposure to the app and with exposure to the gameplay mechanic. And that was kind of my way into it as a realm of study. Do you want to discuss kind of your opinion on the issue of shaping?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do not support the idea that there's really exotic matter and it's really shaping people's brains. However, what we have noticed is that a lot of people, there are sort of two attitudes towards this, and that is that if exotic matter is indeed shaping people's brains, that it's basically a hostile hack of the human mind, and that the shapers are some kind of extra dimensional opponent who are trying to bend us to their will or something. Now, as enlightened, I believe it's probably for the good. This is probably some higher life form that's trying to bump us to the next step. It's kind of like the monolith in 2001, where all of a sudden the monolith shows up and says, hey, you're a bunch of dumb apes and we're going to turn you into humans. The resistance people think this is a hostile takeover of the human mind and have a bad attitude towards it. By the way, I tried knocking down that portal. That was an incredibly well-defended portal. So I was not what? Is that yours? Oh, that was
not mine, but I saw it on plate.
Yeah, I know. Is that your resistance? Yeah, okay. I was wondering. I was having some unfortunate experiences with that portal. But anyway, I'll try it later. I'll get my other weapon back in here.
Tell us a little bit about some of the evidence that you've seen. You've probably seen way more than I have of how people have been shaped.
Well, I mean, here's what we do know, and this is real world, is the very nature of the game is you walk around in the real world to play it. You can't sit on your couch and play Ingress. And we found people losing huge amounts of weight. We have people saying, oh, I lost 25, 30 pounds, and because you walk around a lot. I mean, if you get to level 8 and you walked around the normal amount, you probably walked, I don't know, a few hundred miles. And they're noticing they're getting into better shape. I mean, that's just fact. I mean, nobody's denying that stuff happens. What we find is that a lot of the players, because there's a comm system and the game is best played in groups, we found that Ingress groups have grown up all around the world. There are pretty much, I would say, any city in the world with a reasonable phone system has, an enlightened faction and a resistance faction. And they actually get together, and we can show you later on some of the meetup shots, but they actually get together and, we can sort of just say, okay, we're going to have an event in Melbourne. Okay, I don't know anybody in Melbourne, Australia that plays Ingress, but we decided to have an event in Melbourne. And what was it, like 500 people showed up to knock over portals. And you just kind of, we figured out a good location for the event and had it. And so it's having social effects on people. People are discovering sort of whole new sets of friends. They're bonding with them. These groups almost always create their own logos. Is one thing that Niantic Labs is not particularly geared for is we don't ship swag to people in the form of t-shirts. We don't design Australian logos with kangaroos on them or anything. And the teams just do that. And so you'll see the Melbourne team, Melbourne Light will have their logo and Melbourne Resistance. And so we noticed, I think what really took us by surprise more than anything was the social component of the game. That people in the real world contact each other, go out and meet each other, and form clubs and groups. That's really it. And while not a lot is known about the difference between being enlightened and resistance, you will see 20, 30, 40-page treatises on what it means to be enlightened. Okay, and why somebody is resistance, and that's the kind of thing that that we just get out of the way of because the players that have experienced it. Now, whether this experience is due to some transdimensional matter, whether it's just their experience in life, that's anybody's guess. But there is something kind of interesting about the amount of thought that's put to it.
One of the interesting kind of anecdotal things that I found. I think what Flint mentioned is both of these items are true, but both of them can also be explained away, I think, much more easily, which is a game that is designed to function socially will cause people to socialize, and a game that is designed to cause people to physically move themselves will cause the kinds of things to happen, when you physically move yourself. But actually, there are also reports of people fundamentally changing their nature. People, there's a show, for example, run by some of the people who use this app called Behind the Scanner, and in the most recent episode, the person.
These are very, very hardcore players. Okay, we've noticed no changes in anybody.
Well, but I mean, for example,
was not those guys. I'll give you those guys. Okay, yeah.
Well, but I mean, in some ways, wouldn't you expect people who engage more heavily with a kind of medium to be changed by it? But would you be able to fundamentally change the nature of a person? I think that's the question I come back to, which is why is Ingress fundamentally changing the nature of some people?
Well, I mean, we've had a lot of people who claim that. Now, in most cases, the truth is I didn't know them before they started playing Ingress, so I can't testify to the fact that they've been changed. And I've only seen limited evidence that they've been shaped by any kind of exotic matter. There are people like Kira who offered me pretty good evidence. But once again, I didn't know her before Ingress, so I don't know how she was different.
Is there what purpose does Ingress serve for you?
Me? Well, I'm the creative lead on the project. I think it's like, as far as a transmedia, alternate reality kind of a project, it's the best project anybody's ever had.
Why so?
Well, because we have all these different guys. We're making videos. We make daily drops. We have a story. It's fascinating storytelling because there's something new comes in every day. And we do comics, and we've done a couple novels, and we've done a lot of videos, and we have a weekly show. But every day there's some new piece of the story that appears. And most of it I write, some of it just kind of comes from places. But so every day there's a new piece to the puzzle, and the piece of the puzzle makes sense of old pieces of the puzzle. They set up other questions, and it all started with a thing called the Niantic project, which was, some of it's real, but I mean, we took off the fiction pretty quickly. That it happened at CERN. They were studying what exotic matter was. They found the portals. They found they were exuding exotic matter. They found that many of them had been marked in the real world, and then apparently the fiction takes off where apparently the scanner got out, and all of a sudden something that was supposed to be kept to a very small research group is now disseminated among people all over the world.
Is there any truth in the kind of, we'll call them rumors, that there may be an actual intelligence agency backing sort of the Ingress app, or kind of the behavior it causes?
Well, okay, all right, I'll tell you what the rumor is, all right? No intelligence agency has come to me and said, hey, we want you to start spreading these whoppers, okay? So, all right, but what the rumor is there's a National Intelligence Agency. If you do your wiki test on the National Intelligence Agency, we discover there really was one, but it was believed to be shut down and was kind of rolled into the CIA. But anyway, what does appear a lot is I believe that, yes, there was a real National Intelligence Agency, but I really believe it's not functional now. And I certainly don't believe that it has leaked this app into the real world in order to trick millions of people into harvesting. What are there, 3 million Ingress players now? Something like this, some large number, into harvesting exotic matter for a secret government agency. I mean, that sounds a little silly, doesn't it?
No,
but there are
silly,
many people who believe this,
but
and they show up with documentation, and it's like, that idea was mine. That didn't come from some secret intelligence agency.
So you have not received kind of any additional...
No guys, no black helicopters have shown up in my house, no.
But that's not how the real intelligence world operates. The real world intelligence operates where someone just drops an idea.
There have been no mysterious drops into my bank account.
You're sitting in a bar and someone walks up next to you and says something that later turns into an idea. That's how influence is.
Well, but that's interesting. Any creative person, any storyteller doesn't know where their ideas come from. And what is kind of curious about it is, we have had things appear over the transom, which is how I got interested in it long before I worked on the project. I was doing a Buck Rogers panel at Comic-Con. You can find this on YouTube, it's really happened. And some wacko artist named Tycho came up and started accosting me. And my grandfather was a creator of Buck Rogers. This is true. And I'm doing this panel, and this guy comes up and claims that we've been leaking secrets about the structure of the universe in Buck Rogers panels for the last 40 years. And now, or 80 years really. And now, I may look kind of old, but I'm not around long enough to have been like 80 years, but putting things in Buck Rogers comics. But it intrigued me because, the guy was let out of the room, but, by people they said were probably some intelligence agency. I think it was probably Comic-Con security, but the guy was taken away. That was Tycho. What was interesting is some of the stuff was kind of prophetic, and later on it ended up in the story. But I don't think there was no intelligence agency said that was supposed to go into the story.
Okay. My interest in Ingress...
Roz is not entirely trusting me here, I don't think.
No, not entirely. And the reason is because I feel, how I feel is regardless. What I believe is that a next generation augmented reality experience could easily be co-opted by a agenda, and let's leave who the agenda comes from or where the agenda comes from off the table. So that if you can mobilize people in the real world, and if you can convince them to change their innate nature by interacting with a medium, that would be something that a government would be interested in. That would be something that a power group would be interested in.
That's very definitely true.
And to make something like that happen, you know, the internet exists because of ARPANET. You can trace back most of these things that we now take for granted in our world, the technology, most of the technology in this device, to research conducted by the interest groups.
Right.
And from what I could tell, based on the scale and the nature of behavior change we're witnessing with Ingress, I find it unlikely that it's a for fun, for entertainment property. It's much more reasonable to believe that.
Well, you guys ought to play it, and you tell me whether you're entertained.
Research-based project, or potentially a already modified form of research that was conducted previously for a specific reason. As to what that reason is, I think that's open to debate, and I don't necessarily want to get into that.
Well, I mean, look, I can't prove that that's not true, and frankly, it could be, and I wouldn't know it. But you know, everything I have seen, you know, appears to me that, you know, it's kind of an entertainment product that, you know.
Well, that's your role on this project, is to continue the idea that it is an entertainment project. So basically, it's fiction.
Wait a second. All right, then you got to tell me what you believe. You either believe that I'm secretly working for the non-existent
No,
National
I'm not going to accuse you.
Or you believe that I've been hacked by a bunch of transdimensional beings, and I'm having these ideas. I'm a transdimensional plagiarist.
Where do your ideas come from?
Well, where's any idea come from?
That's a good question.
You just have an idea. I mean, it just comes, you know.
Well, but do you believe that there is reason to believe that ideas could be planted in somebody without them being aware of it?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course they could, but I mean, I'm not walking down the street, you know, and all of a sudden, boom, oh,
no.
I think the plot ought to go this way. You know?
Do you believe that you may have been influenced into creating a fiction?
Well, I think, you know, and pretty much I'm sure a lot of these people out here are writers and creative people and stuff like that. I mean, you know, whenever you're any kind of a creative person or writer, you do kind of wonder, you know, where did that come from? I mean, some things that you work on, it's like really obvious. But, you know, certainly when I was writing Transformers, it wasn't like, you know, some giant robot was showing up in my house. You know, I didn't have like, you know, some transforming, you know, car show up in my garage and say, hey, well, I want to tell you what's happening with the, you know, I mean, that didn't happen. So, you know, I didn't have something show up outside my window. You know, I mean.
Well, but you're spinning it into sort of something absurd, but the fact is, you know, I mean, you could do something subtle. You could, you know, touch your eye during a conversation and cause somebody to look at that. You could then change the nature of a conversation by
that's probably true. Okay, so yes,
kind of
in theory,
so what I'm asking is not,
ideas
you know,
in my head,
did someone implant an electrode in your tooth and cause you to think something? What I'm asking is on this project, have you noticed outside influences?
So what I will tell you I've noticed is weird synchronicities and things that violate normal probability, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, when you're in an alternate universe for a long time, and you think in an alternate universe, you do begin to question what reality is. Because I mean, think about just how improbable your real life is. You just think about anything that happened. You know, I mean, you could just, if you went and did a flow chart of, you know, or you know, link chart of everything that led you to be in this room listening to this at this moment, it would be a series of improbabilities. And then you have to ask, is there really a bunch of improbabilities, or is there some kind of force leading you to that? And then, yeah, you're right. You know, I mean, that much I'll give you. You know, it's, you know, could I be being influenced? Yeah. And it would be interesting to know how you would influence people to think certain things and to have certain ideas. Yeah, that much is true, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's fundamentally what Ingress is.
Well,
it's an influencer.
Well, it's an influencer, but what's really funny is that in this particular case, the players influence the story a lot. In other words, you know, outcomes of certain anomalies, ideas players have, links players have that, you know, to things in the story or things that, you know, no writer would ever think of, right? But then, and I guess if I were making your argument, I would be saying that they too are being shaped by it. And so it's a massive shaping that just comes to a centrally agreed upon reality, that, you know, alternate reality. that may in fact be real reality. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But this is what I do feel like.
Yeah, exactly, yes, yeah. I mean, does anybody out here have any questions or anything you want? Yeah.
So it sounds awesome, and I'm on Apple, so I can't play it. But
You will soon. Okay, we are assured that iOS, it's already been announced in the Ingress report, iOS will be out there soon, and so you'll be able to.
They said it was this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's,
No, it was-
much more imminent than that, like,
Oh, okay.
like this month, I mean, I mean, it's an issue of weeks and,
Okay.
not multiple numbers of months is what I like to believe.
I remember last year.
I know.
It'll be out in 2000.
The rumor mill is quickly, probably a bunch of shapers were in there messing with stuff,
possibly. So that'll be great, because then we get to see what, the whole Android universe has been experiencing.
Yes.
And I
Yeah,
guess-
and that's the unfortunate thing is now you can see the story and the fiction, a lot of it's pretty well chronicled on G+, on the Niantic project page. You can see what the assets are and the characters, and you go to YouTube, Ingress on YouTube, you can see a lot of videos that follow the, that stuff, the story, but yeah, actually hacking portals, you need an Android right now.
So what I'm actually, in that specific realm, this isn't a question, but what I'm specifically interested in is the fact that the demographics of Android users versus iOS users are actually markedly different. They actually did a heat map of what services and phone types that people use, and there are certain areas where there's definitely overlap in a lot of areas, but there are certain places where it is like, this is where people use iPhones, this is where people use Android. So once you have that come in, you basically have an influx of players in an area where it previously wasn't being played. And that would be a really interesting thing to see.
I think that'll happen, and I think a lot of people will be able to play with their friends.
Yeah, that too.
Like my wife and daughter use iPhones, and my son and I use Androids. And so pretty soon everybody in the family will be able to play, on their own phone. Yeah, so that'll be profound. I mean, we're in an extremely iPhone-centric area. I mean, how many people here have iPhones? Okay, how about Androids? Let's do an Android. In this particular room, it's pretty even. You have both? Oh, I thought you had your hands up both.
Well, actually, a lot of people in the LA area will have both, or potentially, it'll be mixed because of the development.
Yeah, or some people have iPhones, but they also have iPads.
Right.
And you can play with them.
I was wondering if you might talk to the, people that are fans of Star Wars become Jedi.
Yeah.
People that are fans of Star Trek learn how to speak Klingon. Whereas it seems that people that are fans of Ingress have Ingress weddings, get Ingress tattoos. And I'm just wondering, when you're talking about this idea of influencing people to do things they might not otherwise do as a subset of playing a game, there's sort of proof that people are doing that, because you can go and see pictures of it happening. You can see video of people getting married with Ingress weddings. And I'm wondering how much of that is just sort of an extension of fan culture, and how much of that is something else. And I think why I asked the something else question is because Star Wars has had, close to 40 years now to build that kind of thing.
Right.
Star Trek has had 60 years almost to build that kind of thing. Ingress has been playable for 18 months?
Yeah, well, we didn't come out of beta until Christmas, in fact, I think.
So what do you think about
It
that?
was like the 15th. Oh, no, I mean, it would be interesting to know what you think about it, but I mean, I have seen bursts of kind of creativity and fan following. I mean, to get an access code, they asked for somebody to send some art, and what was it, like 30,000 pieces of art came in. I mean, shocking amounts of art, and some of it looked like I drew it, and some of it was, professional quality stuff. I mean, beyond what professionals would do for us. Yeah, and there's something in the jewelry. A lot of people are making jewelry. A lot of people are. I mean, the swag and the interesting things they make. And part of it is that we don't make a lot. We have pins and we have some posters and all that. But the interesting thing, the fan culture part of Ingress is that it's amazing the stuff people will go out and make if you're not doing it. You know what I mean? They want it, and there are a lot of, there's no article of clothing I haven't seen Ingressified. There's no event in somebody's life I haven't seen Ingressified. People take it as their own. And, at a creative level, I view the fans and the players as they're kind of participants and co-creators. It's not like any other medium I've ever worked in where you are at a company and you're making a TV show or a movie or a game and you're releasing it to a public who receives it.
So in regards to fan culture influencing the marketing, I guess, in a way of the game, I don't know how big of a gamer you are, but we're at a game convention. Yeah. So have you ever played Legend of the Five Rings? Are you familiar with that?
No, I haven't. No.
Are you familiar with the franchise?
No.
The AEG company. They also have. Legend of the Five Rings originally was a card game, a collectible card game like Magic the Gathering or something like that. But their whole model is fan promotion, as in when you win tournaments, you get to make story decisions and stuff like that. So I'm actually kind of surprised you hadn't heard of that.
No,
it's the exact same thing in a lot of ways. If you win events, you get to choose or determine certain outcomes.
Yeah, we have that. I mean, it's funny. And a lot of times, we'll have an idea what the outcome is, but it'll sort of play out in the real world differently. Like we had one event where the teams were competing over some secret documents. And you know about that one.
I did.
Yeah.
That was nice, right?
Yeah, Roz will tell you that story. That was a really interesting one.
My understanding of that event was, I think that one was connected to London.
Yes.
Where
It was time zero.
a character, named Clue, was made a hostage of a player group. Not physically a hostage, but a hostage in terms of power, because they possessed certain documents that someone else needed and was willing to go to great lengths for.
See, the players found the documents in the real world. And the idea was these corporations were bidding and they were trying to bribe them with game objects or to pay them off with game objects to get the papers released publicly, and the group wouldn't do it. What they really wanted was this character. She's a very cute girl. And what the players wanted was the character. So there was an event held later to determine whose side she would be on, whether she was enlightened or resistance. But they had to put the character's sort of, soul up for sale to get these papers. It was kind of funny. That would be a great model. We didn't really think about it that way. I've just done a lot of work. I mean, the first stuff I did was I was working on Dungeons and Dragons stuff with Gary Gygax, and you couldn't be in that world and not notice the just raw enthusiasm and creativity of fans. And so I'd always sort of expected that. So you take that, and you got this global component where people start making stuff up, and you've got a kind of storytelling where it's all about the synapse. I mean, you tell them thing A and you tell them thing B, and they make the connections. That's the whole thing. Our storytelling is very gamified. And so the story is a game that we're playing with the players, and every once in a while they get to determine a move. Actually, more than every once in a while, but they get to determine how they're going to interpret it, which may be totally different than what we have in mind when we're doing it. So this is,
Oh, sorry. So, coming from the alternate reality game field, everything you're describing is nothing new.
that is true.
You know what I mean? I mean, ARG has been around 11, 12 years. I guess, I haven't had a chance to play it, so I'll give that caveat. But every picture I see of players posting of Ingress is nothing but a group of people sitting there looking at their phones.
Yes, it is not. It is, at the moment, hopefully when everybody has glass like this gentleman here, it will be a slightly more photogenic game. Now what it is not is it's at least not people sitting on their butts looking at computer screens. They usually have like an outdoor real world background,
And I mean, but
it is absolutely true. If you're saying the profile of the Ingress player is this, that's correct.
well, no, and yeah, it's a group of people just sitting there and on their phones, you know, and so that doesn't really excite me to get into the game, you know, and speaking to your thesis at ArtFest last year, we had a DARPA is actually doing a full year study, which is ending this year. So we had a whole panel of them speaking about what they're looking for, about how arts can be used in other non-traditional ways rather than entertainment. But, you know, at what point do you assume responsibility for those changes you're putting in people? You know, if you look through the history of arts, there's been the arts that have gotten very bad. There's been suicides. There's been people hurting other people. You know, you start talking about changing people and saying, oh yeah, we're changing people. Well, sometimes that's not always good. So do you have outs, or do you talk to people? You know, do you have a way to say, you know, maybe we need to back off of this storyline or something along those lines?
Well, yes. I mean, there are many decisions we made. That, like, for instance, there's no PvP in it, because we know we have people walking around in the real world with phones. And do we want really two guys battling, other than him, you know, thwarting me in my efforts to knock down the portal? But do we want people aware of each other fighting in the real world where we can't control them? Just made a decision. No, we don't want that.
Sure.
You know, and yeah, I mean, anytime you have people doing something, anything, you know, in the real world, you know, there is a risk they're doing stupid things, but you try to minimize it. Yeah, and thus far we haven't had a lot of that stuff, you know, knock on wood. We haven't had a lot of bad stuff happen, but you know, I mean, yeah, anytime you do anything, you know, it's kind of like, you know.
Well, I understand that, but it seems like you're glorifying, like, hey, we're making this game that you're changing people. That, you know,
I don't know that we set out to make the game change people. And most of the changes we've seen, I mean, if people are in better shape and they're losing weight and they have a lot more friends, I don't see.
Sure, know that.
Now, I don't know that I own the responsibility if it goes bad and one guy kills another guy. And if I hadn't made this game, then they wouldn't have met each other, so therefore they wouldn't have gotten in a fight, wouldn't have killed each other.
I guess my question is that conversation happening at Google? Do you know what I mean? Because
there are a lot of, as far as anticipatable problems, okay, like what I was talking about PvP.
Sure.
Okay, you know, people getting mad at each other in the real world is something we just decided that's not what we want to do right now.
No.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying we'll never have PvP, but for the time being, we just thought, you know, that opens up a world that we're not really comfortable with.
What you're talking about, though, is not a problem that arts have. That's a problem that influencers have, regardless of where they.
Well, I understand that, but your whole storyline is that this energy is coming and changing people in their minds. So you're putting people into this alternate reality, saying your mind's being changed.
But everything puts you into an alternate reality.
For alternate reality games, yes, I agree with that. But the storylines aren't always, oh, this mystical energy is coming through these spots of the earth and getting in your mind and changing your mind. You know what I mean?
We have not had any psychotic breaks that we can directly attribute to Ingress. But I mean, the truth is, I mean, let us suppose Raza is not right and not fronting for an intelligence agency doing this, okay, or an alien force doing this. His point is actually well worth listening to. I mean, you know, and that is, any powerful, influential medium is going to put thoughts in people's minds. I mean, let's talk about rock and roll. Okay, you know, as far as, you know, changing a culture. And that's just guys with guitars, you know, writing varying degrees of incendiary, you know, music, a lot of times totally unintentionally. I don't think Paul McCartney was writing Helter Skelter thinking Charlie Manson was going to hear it and decide that was a really good reason to go kill, you know, Sharon Tate and the folks over at the mansion. You know, I mean, you know, a lot of that's pretty unanticipated. And, you know, though at that point Paul McCartney knew, yeah, we're the Beatles and we're incredibly influential. But what's he supposed to do, stop writing?
Right, no, and I guess, you know, but once again, he wasn't writing a song saying, hey, someone's getting into your mind. Do you know what I mean? I guess.
I don't know if you were there.
Well, fair enough. All right.
Well, but I think partly to your point, I mean, a big part of rap music is exactly about that, though. Be a thug, kill a cop, all of that stuff has been out there in music. We don't stop it. We don't stop films about that. We don't stop books
Well, he's
about
asking a
that.
question about,
I mean, and the reality is that the moment you start putting the filter on that, then where do you stop? Where does the filter stop? Where do you say it's acceptable to do a murder story about killing this person but not killing that person? It's acceptable to do a story singing about killing these guys that you don't like, but cops and firemen are off limits. You know, that kind of stuff is exactly the slope that no one wants to go on if you're creative.
Well, but if you spin that 180, sort of, if we had that conversation about, you know, does listening to love songs make you a more romantic person? Is somehow then, you know, the person who writes love songs responsible for the rise in teen pregnancy?
Exactly. Well, I just think but I mean, it's just it's a dangerous conversation because what it does is, you know, the idiot that killed those people a couple of days ago, right? First thing you see on Drudge Report, video games. Every time some idiot goes out and shoots somebody, it's always video games. And the reality is you have video games as the dominant entertainment medium for most people now between the ages of probably 13 and 50. Video games is probably their dominant medium of entertainment. Sure, they're not out there shooting everybody else up. So, you know, it's just like, it seems to me that's just sort of a cheap way out of the conversation.
Well, and I understand exactly what you're saying, and maybe I am just playing devil's advocate.
well, all right, suppose what I'm saying, all right, suppose we take this another way. Suppose by bringing up the subject of, I mean, obviously it would be very easy to look at thought influence as being a metaphor for what's happening in our culture. And I personally believe, okay, that this thought may have been planted in my head somewhere, but I personally believe that we are in a culture now that is an alternate reality. I mean, I grew up in a world where all of your news came from 3 networks and a few big city newspapers and radio stations. And they all had a very much shared world vision. It was very much a shared world. That, you know, Walter Cronkite pretty much lived in the same, you know, universe as, you know, Chet Huntley, or the same universe as Peter Jennings, or whoever the guys were. But they all pretty much agreed what was important, what was unimportant, what mattered, what it did. Well, we're sitting here in 2014 and we live in a world that there is no shared vision of what's important, what's not important, what happened, what didn't happen, what we should think about it, because we're living in the internet world. And so to say, I'm going to create a fiction that is about people influencing your thoughts, what you're really saying is you better be very careful and curate your thoughts well, because there are a lot of people out there trying to influence your thoughts.
And that's
through every imaginable way, intentionally and unintentionally, from every single person's point of view.
So,
Yeah.
so I think in some way you're saying it's more like raising awareness that, you know, you might want to consider where your thoughts come from.
Yeah, you might want to think about exactly where your thoughts come from and what pictures you are summing up to form your reaction.
I think, because I understand where you're coming from in terms of that, and it's a very popular media thing. Like you said, like, you know, video games are often like.
But the difference between video games and CDs is that they're not coming into your world, you're turning them on and off. You know, whereas alternate reality games, you have characters calling you. You have, you know, emails coming to you. You have, you know, events, you know, people in trucks swinging up and handing off briefcases, or you have to go and find stuff in the real world. Or, you know, so you're going into the real world rather than you're sitting there playing a game.
So you're saying it's more immersive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's alternate reality, right? That's the whole goal, is to give you this idea that you're living in this alternate reality.
Well, and also to a game that takes you out into the real world. Okay, you know, I mean, I don't know. I've been involved in, I don't know, probably 60, 70 shipped product video games. Okay, you never get quite the pixel resolution in a video game that you get, say, in this room. I mean, we're all actually sitting here. We got actual, like, weather effects. The sound bed is incredibly accurate. I totally believe she's walking over there and she's not pathed. You know, it seems like she's walking like a real person in a real direction. You take a game out into the real world, and what inevitably happens to you, and this is what I think is cool, is you look at the real world a whole different way.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I mean, all of a sudden you're really paying attention. One of the cool byproducts of this game is that many of the portals are public works of art. I have no idea how much public art there is that I walk by every day and utterly ignore, and how amazing a lot of it is. How many sort of historical places, or I mean, and because the definition of public art in Ingress is pretty broad, but every portal is something kind of cool. And usually it's something that doesn't have to be cool. It's like somebody just went and made this and put this here. Sometimes for reasons, known reasons, sometimes for unknown reasons. And
So just as a basic question, not having played it, so who's curating all these portals? And you said somebody made it. Can players make portals?
yes, players make portals.
Okay. Because I've heard of stuff where like they make outlines.
Well, I know on the map, basically you go to a place in the real world and take a photograph of it. And it's built into the interface, it's very easy to use. And you take, like I submit portals. Because bear in mind, if, that what the project, the certain kind of people who tend to be resistant and enlightened, they're all into the larger category of sensitives. And if I were making a paranoid theory about why this game is being done, it is to find sensitives in the world. But the idea is you walk around the world, whatever, if you think something is cool, and there are rules, it has to be on public property, you take a picture of it. And so if nothing else, we're building a database of everything that everybody thinks is cool in the world.
Which is good.
Like I tend to walk around, I live in Los Angeles, so when I select portals, I like old kitschy things. I like the giant donuts and weird things people build for just LA stuff. We don't have a lot of 14th century cathedrals around here, so I go for anything you see in the world that's just like wow. I mean there's like an auto body shop somewhere on Ventura Boulevard I just submitted that has a waterfall going down the side of the wall. I mean what moment, for what reason, did somebody decide I think the proper thing to do with the wall of our auto shop is to have a waterfall go down this? I mean, truth is, it was probably, a Polynesian restaurant, when it was built, and the waterfall is just kind of there, and the guys at the auto shops, this will be the waterfall.
There's historical significance.
But what happens is, inevitably happens when you play this game, is the real world gets a lot more interesting. It's what the game does is make you aware of that, because you actually have a reason why that waterfall matters to you. It's a portal. But then when you re-encounter that part of the real world, it's like, oh, there's a waterfall, and there's this like mermaid, mural sitting there for why? What's a mermaid doing in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard?
One of the mechanics within Ingress and what makes it interesting from a research point of view, and also why I'm a little bit suspicious of sort of the truth behind it, is that it is an interrupting medium, where basically the assumption is that people live their lives on autopilot. And if you can interrupt that, then you change their life fundamentally.
I absolutely agree. I mean, like I said, as an art designer myself, I mean, that's our goal, right? Is to make the life a little more interesting, to take those things. And like I said, and I've heard great things about the game. I'm not really jumping down. It was my concern, just sort of as the conversation was beginning here earlier, just about talking about changing people's minds and the way people think, is that there are cases of alternate reality games that have gone really bad, of people getting into those characters and not necessarily.
There are also cases of reality having gone.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying, oh, you can't. There's no way you're going to protect against this, really. But the fact that your story is actually about your mind being changed. Do you know what I mean? I mean, to me, that's your reality.
All story is about mind being changed.
But not so blatantly.
Is that we're
The making of literal.
And once again, just sort of playing devil's advocate.
But consider the possibility that by talking about that, we're having people think about it, so they'll notice it if it's happening. In other words, You know, in other words, the conversation is about where do your thoughts, where do your opinions, where do your beliefs come from, and what is reality? Sure. I mean, even the physical act of walking around the world and having all this stuff pop up that you never saw, and you've been there. You know, I mean, I found stuff in Westwood. I lived there for 30 years. I've never noticed it.
So, well, I guess the thing you're saying, the idea that I think you're coming to is that if you do an ARG in which you're pretending to be a secret agent or a fairy or a vampire, you can disassociate yourself from the fact that you really are that.
Yeah.
But if you're making an ARG that's based around the idea that maybe something is influencing your thoughts, it's harder to disassociate yourself from that being potentially real.
Right,
Sort of the
yes,
point
that's.
So you're saying that the fictional conceit itself has a more believable quality to it than if you were to do something that everyone would obviously identify as being purely fantasy, science fiction.
Well, oh yes, I know.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead and answer that question.
Oh no, I mean, with me, I mean, what's really funny is that you know you live in an alternate reality for long enough, and you can go around being a person. I mean, we all have to
But it seems like
consider the possibility.
it seems like to me, it seems like the point is you're blending, you're doing something where you're actually embracing the idea of an alternate reality game to the point where people could actually believe they're playing it.
Well,
And it'd be
it's
real,
a reality.
rather than,
Okay.
hey, there's a dragon around this corner, and I know there's no dragon around the corner, and therefore.
And even the discussion about the NSA. I mean that discussion is, you know, as a
You're
slight
blending
government
reality too
paranoid,
much.
you know, is like, well now I'm not even worried about this magic game. Now I'm worried about the NSA is controlling this game. Do you know what I mean?
That might be something.
I mean, just in players' minds.
That might be something you want to be concerned
Well,
about.
of course, absolutely.
Okay, so I think there's 2 points now that I want to bring up. One, I think with regards to fantasy and reality, and one of the things with ARGs that you do specifically is that in ARGs, you as the player are the character as well. Like if you're sitting down playing D&D, it's like I am so-and-so elven paladin of whatever, right? And it's not you anymore. It's you. There is a very solid disconnect between you and the character, but some people still go down that path anyways. But in this one, there is no real disconnect between you and the character. You are the character. I think the second thing I wanted to bring up was, do you actually have a demographic, a polling, I guess, on how many players are actually invested in the story? Because from my point of view, no one is invested in the story.
Yeah, what you figure with any video game, I mean, just my experience, or you know, anything, you know, from Diablo to D&D to other stuff that I've done, you get, there is a portion, in almost any IP, you could argue this, I mean, all the way to the NFL, that there is a portion of people who are deeply invested in the particulars of it. In other words, you know, I could be watching the Super Bowl with, my family, 3 other families, 5 kids, 5 wives, 5 guys, and I will get to, at one end of the spectrum, somebody who vaguely understands that the guys wearing the blue and orange are the Denver Broncos, and the 12 guys, they're from Seattle, and, you know, may not even know the Denver team's called the Broncos, you know, but thinks Peyton Manning's kind of good looking or something, you know, all the way down to guys that are sitting there looking at the game, okay. I mean, those guys, okay, you know, what I'm looking at is what I know is that, you know, Manning's getting burned on the slant because, because he's comparing linebackers to tight ends and what they do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, any intellectual properties like that. With Ingress, we have a small but fanatical. I would say that there are 2,000 people who can be expected to comment in a period of a week. And we have certain numbers. I mean, we have metrics, not demographics. Right. We have metrics.
Right.
Okay. We know that we've got like 35 million hits on our.
I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Yeah, on our fiction page. I'm making up numbers, but that's pretty close. It has over 1 million followers for the page that's just strictly the fiction, not the game.
Right.
that you will have, so, that probably means somewhere like 10, 20,000 people are at least seeing this page a day, clicking to the page in a day. And we know that a fraction of people who actually read something comment on it. Like I, in real life, have never written a letter to an editor in my life. I just, I'm pretty parasitical when it comes to following news stories. I don't follow them. I just don't tend to write letters to editors. So we know, we have actual metrics on how many people actually touch the fiction. And so in our game, the analogy of the person who vaguely knows that the Broncos and the Seahawks are playing in the Super Bowl, anybody who knows they're light and resistance is touching the fiction. Okay, and they'll vaguely know it. In our case, the fiction and the game itself it is very, this is changing, but the fiction is very unrepresented inside the app itself.
Yeah,
and it's on a very different track, and that's an engineering issue. That is, we just simply have not, in the course of it, because, at that level, Ingress is not a trivial piece of engineering. When you have, 3 million people playing all over the globe, and all the objects really exist. They don't exist in your scanner. They really exist, in servers. You're tracking a lot of stuff, and you're gotten how many different phone systems, and how many different phones, and how many different suppliers, and and so on. So that we have not integrated the fiction well into the itself, but it has its own life, and it slowly spreads. People start reading the books. We've sold thousands of books. The comic books we haven't had for sale anywhere. We give them out at events, and so it kind of radiates. But it's like any fiction like that. Once again, the NFL. Everybody's watching the Super Bowl. Okay, but the level of intensity and understanding of what they're watching, varies wildly depending on what people are watching. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But based upon your metrics, like you said, it seems like it's only a small fraction that are engaged in.
Yeah, I would say with almost anything you get, almost any game fiction.
Yeah, it seems more people are, but this goes back to your point of, people taking the game fiction and going nuts with it. It's kind of a really small fraction. I think I'd be more worried, personally, from my experience, I'm more worried about people getting upset at other people for in-game actions of oh, you spooked my portal and you took it out, there's a lot of that. Yeah, and it really causes a lot of, that's what causes the most problems and was more likely to cause an actual PvP incident people that I've heard in San Diego, there are people who get really aggressive with their cars, go block people in the parking lots and stuff.
And that's, so that's not, those are things I'm worried about as well as a designer, right? Which I'm sure you guys are in the no PvP, because that's something that Ari's learned, that we don't set up two competing groups, because as soon as you divide the player groups up into two competing groups, they are competing groups, and they will do anything to win. But you're talking about, yes, it's a small fraction, but he's saying that small fraction is immensely involved and into the story, is seriously dedicated to the story. And those are the players I worry about. The general players who are, hey, yeah, I got one here, I got to see this cool thing. But once again.
What I will tell you about that, there's a weird thing about Ingress. I've worked on games from, paper role-playing games to ultra-violent, nasty, video games to everything else. Ingress is different than anything I've ever worked on in the sense that there are people who get angry, there are incidents and all that, but by and large, it's the most benign game community I've ever seen in my life. The fiction gets shockingly little snark. You read through, because everything gets snark.
Yeah.
Okay? You read through it, and it's just kind of shockingly little, and it's sort of never supported and it goes away. The general players just have a really great time out there playing. I don't think I've ever heard of a fist fight in an anomaly or anything like that. It may have happened, nobody told me about it, I've just never heard of it. And it's certainly not something that's ever been a problem for us. I haven't seen any legal actions taken. You have stuff like, players come into town for an anomaly and one of them gets, is drunk and has to be pulled out of jail, but it's not really Ingress that did that. There's not, we don't have a drinking game portion of Ingress.
So thank you.
Okay, good, yeah, thanks for coming. So we just, it's, what's really funny about it is it's competitive, but there's just, because the nature of the game is it's not, you're attacking neutral objects, you're not attacking people. And that was a decision we made really early on. So, and just even that mental buffer between the two seems to have lessened the amount of trouble that happens.
Okay.
And so, answer to your larger question of, do we think about this and are we aware of it? Definitely. Could we be doing deep down psychic damage that we're unaware of? Yeah, possibly. There's just thus far no evidence of it. But what is very interesting from a game point of view is the minute a real person is playing themselves in a game environment, you actually see their stats change. If you broke these real people down into old school role-playing stats, people would find their stamina goes up, their character class changes, their physical, their charisma changes, their relationships certainly change because they know all these other people playing. And certainly their awareness of the world they're in changes. And it's kind of interesting. And also it's really hard to walk around the real world and be playing and not have this funny feeling you look over and is that guy playing too? And just often enough he is. My wife and I were out knocking down portals. My wife has a zero geek in her. Okay, she finds most of the work I do really embarrassing. But with Ingress, we're out there playing in Westwood, and I'm getting the same feeling. It's like when he was neutralizing me when I was tagging the portal here, and I'm getting the feeling there's somebody else out here. Matter of fact, there are a couple of people out here. And finally, this couple out of central casting for We're a Normal Couple came walking up. Well, which are you, Enlightened or Resistance? And my wife was really pleased to see normal people are playing the game. And then and I say, yeah, we're Enlightened. Yeah, we are too. That guy over there is knocking down stuff, and all of a sudden she starts noticing, and I had this because I'm used to it. But I had this vicarious thrill of her for she's looking around. There's a guy over there playing. There's a guy over there playing. It was right around Christmas. It was a big Ingress day in Westwood, and she realized, wow, there's a whole secret world out there, and that can spin you off into all sorts of interesting thoughts too. So anyway, that's it. What are we doing on time here?
We're probably done. Fundamentally, I don't think the creators of fiction can take credit for changes, either good or bad, in their audience. And I also fundamentally disagree with the idea that ours are more immersive than other kinds of fiction. Some of the most immersive fictions I've had have been when I was a kid and my mom was telling me a story, and I was using my brain to fill in the recap. The idea that we use the real world as a storytelling object is interesting, but I don't think it changes an immersion factor. Good stories cause immersion regardless of their medium, and that immersion can be utterly total. That's possibly, if you want to make that argument, that explains ideologies going back thousands of years. And ultimately, I don't think the person who creates that fiction can be responsible one way or another for how the edges interact with that medium. All you can do is build your story and build it honestly.
In theory, we could probably do things that would create antagonism. I don't know what they'd be, because we've never had, nobody on our team's ever sat around and said, let's think of some ideas that look like cause fistfights, and in theory.
Oh, it's very easy.
We never.
I think you're right. I think that there's a question of motive. There's a question of motive.
People have intentionally created fiction specifically for the purpose of attempting to do this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. But I think it comes down to a question of motive.
Right. I can think of the game Postal being a perfect example of a game that just said, okay, we're going to go out and offend and piss off and be as obnoxious to as many people as we can possibly be. for the sole purpose of creating controversy and trying to gin up something like.
But I don't remember postal.
But what tends to happen is the audience looks at it and goes, it's crap, because you see how the strings are attempting to be pulled, and it's too manipulative to be, and so obvious in its manipulation, and how it's trying to manipulate, that it's rejected, and it ultimately gets laughed at rather than having the desired result.
Well, I remember this, I was talking to these guys, this comic books, not ours, was kind of interesting, but that we're doing a guy on a book called Exquisite Corpse for Dark Horse years ago. And they didn't have any money for promotion or advertising or anything, so their theory was they were sending, they made the book as offensive as they could possibly make it to like religious types. And then they sent promotional copies to like every preacher in America. And nobody cared. There was no publicity, no preacher got upset about it. Because, I mean, you put a weird demonic tattoo on, on My Little Pony's butt and you have controversy. And a friend of mine explained to me, he said, look, comics, they're about childhood. You dent the Batmobile, people get so upset. They don't get upset if, people get, ritually abused, in offensive comic books. It's a very funny medium that way, and ours, we don't even know what the medium is yet. We're just finding, we're like in the zoetrope, phase of ours right now, or maybe we've gotten all the way to the Great Train Robbery, but I mean, barely. So we're like 20 minutes over.
Yeah, should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so we're good talking to you guys.
Thanks.